I would like to start by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here to your Honourable Elizabeth Dowdeswell, our Lieutenant Governor. Everyone in this room is aware that Ontario residents have faced increasing hydro costs since the closure of our coal-fired energy plants in 2014. The loss of those plants has led to a shortfall in affordable, reliable, and on-demand energy production. In 2003, coal made up 25% of our energy portfolio, and attempts to replace it have proved expensive and unreliable. I am here to inform you about a source of sustainable energy that, according to a 1980s Ontario geological study, could provide the equivalent of 330 million barrels of oil. Northern Ontario muskeg, or bogs if you would prefer, are home to 20% of the world's total peat. Canada as a whole boasts 40%. Peat is partially decomposed plant remains that naturally occur in cool, temperate regions of the Northern Hemisphere. Peat can be processed into fuel-grade material with the energy values equivalent to coal, but with only 10% of the sulfur content and low mercury and ash content. Peat fuel is already widely used in Europe and supports a 400 million euro sector that employs over 16,000 people and represents 7% of Finland's and 8% of Ireland's energy portfolios. The issue in Canada until now has been that our harsh winter climate makes harvesting difficult. A wet harvesting process developed by Dr. Peter Telford has made it possible to develop this energy source. His experimental self-sustaining production facility in Stephenville, Newfoundland, has shown that peat can be harvested and used on site. Serving as a working model for northern and isolated communities that can be outfitted with demand-to-size power plants without the large carbon footprint of transporting fuel. Now, I'm sure you ask, why is this better than other green experiments already being undertaken by our government? Solar and wind projects are a major contributor to energy exports at a loss to the United States. The problem is that they produce energy only when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, not when there's demand. The energy network then adjusts for this by wasting power during overages. Nuclear plants blow off steam. Hydro plants dump water so as not to overload the grid, and expensive to produce energy is exported at a loss to neighboring states. The other side of the problem is that when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining, you need natural gas plants to make up for the shortfall. Solar and wind energy will remain inefficient until affordable and reliable energy storage technology is developed. Peat fuel, though, can be burned on demand, much like coal, for an estimated 8 cents per kilowatt hour, without the need for backup sources. Ontario has an available 8.8 million dry tons per year of peat that could be harvested and generate around 3,200 megawatts, or 10% of Ontario's needs. Aboriginal and isolated northern communities would be among the major beneficiaries of this technology. Fly-in diesel is used in many Aboriginal communities. It can cost over $3 per kilowatt hour. Custom peat fuel power plants could be outfitted to meet each community's needs, and local peat fuel harvesting operations could make these isolated communities self-sufficient. Local jobs would be created. Workers would be needed to harvest peat and convert it into pellets, to restore harvesting sites, and to staff the power station. Inexpensive fruits and vegetables and extravagance, especially during winter months, could be produced through associated heat pump greenhouses. The communities would become greener while providing employment and a stable, healthy food supply. Peat fuel would also be useful for mining operations such as the Ring of Fire. Mining operations for that project are estimated to need 30 megawatts of on-demand power capacity, and it is expected to cost upwards of $1 billion to connect to the main power grid. But an isolated peat fuel power plant could meet the mining operations needs while also producing inexpensive green power. Lower costs and a smaller carbon footprint would attract more mining and business investment and make our province more prosperous. Existing shuttered coal plants could be retrofitted to burn peat fuel. The Atikokan plant was retrofitted to burn biomass from wood byproduct for around 20 cents per kilowatt hour. Thunder Bay was given an experimental advanced biomass shipped from Europe that cost $1.50 per kilowatt hour. Peat fuel, by contrast, is estimated to cost around 8 cents per kilowatt hour, I'll remind you, when burned in such facilities. The Ontario Energy Board's data on 2016 rates per kilowatt hour have nuclear at 6.8 cents, hydroelectric at 5.7 cents, natural gas at 14 cents, wind at 13.3 cents, and solar at a staggering 48.1 cents per kilowatt hour. Even if the 8 cents per kilowatt hour number for peat fuel ends up being a low estimate, the next best green option is wind at 13.3 cents per kilowatt hour, which is intermittent and requires backup sources of power such as natural gas, which drives up costs. An industry could be created for isolated communities all around the world that choose to burn peat fuel. Power plants could be manufactured here in Ontario and shipped to order. Canada's 40% share of the world's supply could be developed for our own use and exported abroad. We would be combating climate change on a global scale. My vision for Ontario is to become a world leader in using peat fuel biomass to produce energy for the main power grid, as well as for remote and isolated communities. We have a substantial green resource in our own backyard that other countries in the world are already proving is viable. The development of a peat fuel industry would build upon existing green investments and drive energy costs down for vulnerable communities. If communities that have become reliant on undependable and expensive sources of energy were to become self-sustaining, we could usher in a new era of prosperity for remote and Aboriginal communities, the province of Ontario, and this country we love.